this lovely episode of The Consultant. We have Debra Rapoport. You're a visual artist. You are a fashion guru. You are deeply passionate about sustainable fashion and just a general walking work of art. But how would you describe yourself?
Definitely a native New Yorker. And I do love to create things out of sustainable materials. So sometimes I'm called Debra Debris. And because I've been doing this for like 60 years, just working with found materials. And it's really just a creative act in a process of play. So that's the way I see myself. That's what gives me the joy and keeps me going in life.
And you know, you're someone who's so deeply comfortable with yourself and sort of expressing yourself. And I don't know, to jump right into the deep end of the swimming pool, like how did you kind of become that way? Like as a kid, were you so visually inclined? And yeah, how did that come about?
Well, my mother was very creative, but of course, having been born and growing up during the Depression, you know, she never could go to art school or have time to paint. But she had a phenomenal eye, and she would even keep us out of school to go antiquing or to museums when we were young, because we grew up as vegetarians and we were never sick. So she kept us home for wellness days. And my grandmother, as most grandmothers, were very creative, you know, knitting and sewing and crocheting. So one story that I always tell is we'd be at Grandma's house, and my sister and I would run and get the button drawer from the old treadle sewing machine and dump it on the living room floor, and my grandfather would say, "Oi, oi, they're making a mess." And Grandma would say, "Be quiet, they're being creative." So what is creativity anyway? It's a joyous act, and we make such a big deal out of it having to be acceptable, you know, museum quality, gallery quality.
But like, what does it mean to be an artist?
Yeah.
And it has to
Forget
look a
the word
certain
art.
way.
Yeah. It's just creative. And like Stan, my partner, says, because he's a wordsmith, the closest thing to the creator is when we create, because that's the energy that's coming from our soul, and that's all that matters. Whether you sell it or show it or whatever, that doesn't matter. You know, it's the life force.
Well, and so going back, so you're a native New Yorker, you grew up here, so you've obviously seen the city change drastically throughout the years.
Yeah.
But I couldn't help but it just went ding, ding, ding. So you grew up as a vegetarian at a time when that was not terribly chic.
The late 40s.
Yes. And so how did your parents get into that? And could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, my father owned a grocery store on the Lower East Side during the war. And after the war, the first A&P came in, supermarket. And he said, all right, we've got to get out of here. So what to do? So we moved to Miami, and he wasn't sure what he was going to do, real estate or what. And we had a neighbor, and my mother used to have hay fever. And the neighbor said to her, if you go on a 10-day grapefruit fast and cleanse your body, you'll never have to take a hay fever shot again. So my mother said, what do I have to lose? So sure enough, and it worked, and she said, okay, Hannah, tell me more. So Hannah was a strict vegetarian, and my mother, always being inquisitive and a maverick, said, okay, we're going to try that. My father, being Eastern European Jew, said, oi, where am I going to get my chopped liver and my stuffed cabbage? And my mother said, you'll just have to go to your mother's. I'm not cooking that way anymore. And my sister and I was 4.5, and my sister was 6 or 7, and we loved it because it was all about color and texture, and there was no reason to rebel, and we were never sick, and so that's why my mother would keep us home from school just for wellness days. And of course, kids would make fun of us. Ooh, what are you eating, that brown rice? It looks like bugs. And I'd say, go back and eat your peanut butter and jelly sandwich and leave me alone.
So beyond ahead of the times.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And what were your kind of teenage years and high school years, and what was New York like then?
Well, we were still very obedient. We didn't smoke. We didn't drink. We were vegetarians. And kids in some way were enamored with us. And we always dressed strange. Like it was
So you were dressing in a unique way even back then. So what does that look like?
Okay, so
times?
Most of the kids were wearing bobby socks and saddle shoes, and we were wearing black tights and Italian ghillie shoes. Okay? So they didn't know what to make of us, but they were intrigued. So they didn't bully us. It was just very enticing. Right. So, and we weren't going to change and go to the saddle shoes and all that. I mean, that was, not who we were. So it was kind of fun. It was kind of fun standing out, but we weren't obnoxious about it. It was just who we were.
Yeah.
Because I am who I am, and I'm a New Yorker, and the only other place I've ever lived was Northern California, Berkeley, for graduate school, and then I taught at the university out there for 8 years, and then I missed New York.
What brought you back to New York ultimately?
Well, I was teaching, and I loved teaching. I was tenured, and it was up at Davis, which was like an hour and a quarter from Berkeley. And I'm just not an administrative type, and I would just get crazed and anxious over certain administrative things I had to do. And I just found that I was getting sick, and I said, if I continue doing this, I'm going to really get ill, and I know my body. And I said, I have to leave. And then I divorced my husband because I just wanted to come back a free agent. I had no idea what I was going to do here. Yeah. As an artist doing performance art and textile art, they really weren't jobs.
Well, so you went to California
For graduate school,
with
yeah.
your husband, or
No, I met him there.
you met him there?
Yeah.
Okay, how did you meet? And then, do you mind talking about that a
That's
little bit?
very bizarre story. Where am I going to make new friends? Because I wasn't a party girl, and I didn't go to bars, and I didn't do drugs.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine from first grade was living in an alternative community called Synanon.
Called what?
Synanon.
Okay.
And it started out in 1958 as a drug rehab. And by 1969, they wanted it to be a full-fledged, mixed, open community. So they were looking for what we would call squares, straight people who weren't into drugs, but who were interested in somewhat of like a kibbutz life. The kids lived kibbutz-like in a group school. And it was fascinating to me. And it felt healthy because it was about nonviolence and no chemical modifiers, and I was intrigued. And then, of course, before I moved in, you do something, you become a game player, and you go down and you play the Synanon game, which was the first encounter group. So the first night I was there, this guy hits on me, and then he became my husband. I married him.
And did you know when you met him that there would be did something register that there was a connection?
No,
or?
but he was very kind, and he took care of me, because I was a newcomer, so that was very gracious. And then about a year and a half later, they did a community wedding, so there were 75 couples that got married. It was one of those bizarre things. And my father was opposed to it, my mother was opposed to it, but my wonderful grandmother said, any grandchild of mine who's getting married, I'm going to the wedding. So there was no way my grandmother could get on a plane and come to. And it was up in Tamales Bay in Northern California. So my mother had to accompany her. And I made my dress, which I still have. It's been exhibited in museums, and it's still a fabulous piece, all hand-painted, that I painted. So then we stayed in the community about 2 years, and then it got really fascistic and beyond. And, there were movies about it and stories about it. So we left. And then I felt I was ready to come back to New York, but I wanted to come back as a free agent. So.
And how did sort of that realization come about, and how did you then ultimately exit?
Well, I guess I had a couple shows in Europe, and so I was wide-eyed, and I wanted a bigger horizon.
Well, so your sense of the world expanded.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that'll
I
do
knew
it.
I had to get back to New York. And to do what, I didn't know. I came back at 36.
That's an interesting age, because I feel like in your late 30s, a lot of people, like the sort of, in quotes, normal or conventional way of life is people are very much in like deep settling down. They're like having families, they're having kids. So what was that like to come back and to New York and be single?
It was definitely a new beginning, and my eyes were wide open, and I knew the sky was the limit. And especially since I had European contacts, and I was already showing internationally and nationally all over. And I even had a major two-person show at what was then the American Crafts Museum in '71. So I knew the potential was there, and it was home also.
Yeah.
So my sister was here, and again, I knew, my feeling about New York. New York is a networking town, and if I just ran my mouth, things would open up.
Yeah.
And that's basically what happened.
Well, and I mean, it sounds like your parents were sort of, in quotes, unconventional in how they raised you. So did you feel a sense of pressure at all to sort of have kids and live that life? Like,
there
what
was some
that
of that, but my mother, who again was a maverick and independent, and I'll say this, she said to my sister and I one day, you know how much I love you, but having kids is not all that it's cracked up to be. So if you don't want kids, don't let your father hear me say this, being Eastern European, of course, there had to be a family. My sister doesn't have kids either. And being New Yorkers, we wanted that sense of independence. And also economically, as a single woman artist, I knew it was going to be hard enough to take care of myself, let alone an appendage of a child. So I knew what my parents put into us, and I didn't know if I had it in me, both emotionally, economically, and all that. I think it's the hardest job there is, bringing up a child.
Yeah.
I have so many friends who are 20, 25, 30. So those those are my kids.
Yeah.
And I love them. They teach me. We teach them.
Yeah.
And so I don't feel like there's a loss or that there's a void anywhere in my life.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not living in a small town isolated. I live in the best city in the world.
Well, and you strike me as someone who's very comfortable talking to people or meeting new people or making new friends. And so what advice, because there's definitely like an advice component to this show. And so what advice would you give to people who are maybe a bit shy about approaching new potential friends, meeting new people in the city? A lot of people I talk to have recently moved to New York and are a bit unsure of how to meet new friends or lovers.
New York, it's so easy to just strike up a conversation. Yeah. And I always find that even if you're at a bus stop and you say one word to someone, they're so happy to engage. If you don't, they'll be very private and they'll turn away.
Yeah. Cold shoulder to cold shoulder, or it's
but
just warmth all around.
Oh my God, it's warming up today. Isn't it great? The sun is out. And in 10 minutes, you have their whole life story.
Yeah.
And when I first moved back to New York, a lot of friends moved here from California, and they were looking for apartments, jobs, and boyfriends. And we would meet for, breakfast meetings. They were all into textiles. And I said, New York is a network town. Do not put an ad in the New York Times looking for apartment, job. I said, just run your mouth. Every job I've ever gotten or anything came from just speaking up and
chatting with people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And make a connection.
Yeah.
And that's how it happens. So that's my philosophy.
What advice would you give people just about feeling comfortable to express themselves and to consider themselves to be artists, even if maybe they don't feel like they could be?
Well, I think we all know it in our gut. And I think we have to trust that. And we're all similar, but we're all different. Oscar Wilde says, be yourself, everyone else is taken. So if you know you're creative, you know whether you're going to be a flute player or you love to cook or whatever it is. And nobody needs to tell you. Too often parents say, well, you should be a lawyer or a doctor. But if you feel inside that you've got another path, you've got to trust that, because otherwise you'll be unhappy for most of your life. And to hang on to a job till you're 65 thinking when you retire that's when life begins, no, that's to be the wrong attitude. And I say hand to mouth is better than 9 to 5. If that's what suits you, frugality is fun. It's better to go thrifting and do exchanges at swap meets and stuff like that than worry about whether you can shop at Tiffany's or Bergdorf's or Bloomingdale's. Because you're just going to work to make money.
Well, and also you're the epitome of like feel good, look good. And no, seriously.
I am who I am. I feel younger now than at 18. At 18, I worried about everything. Am I going to get thrown out of college? Where am I going to live? What am I going to do for a living? Am I
You're
pretty
less
enough?
comfortable with yourself. And you don't feel as like secure in the world, I guess.
And I think that's the thing that, Ari Seth Cohen, when he created Advanced Style, wanted to pull out, that, we're not invisible, but we're alive and well. And the important thing is to stay healthy. And it doesn't matter what you put on. But, of course, if you want to be outrageous and be colorful and feel good, again, feel good, look good, feel good. It goes hand in hand. So, and it's not about shopping, and it's not about trends, and it's not about fashion.
So you brought up Advanced Style. So can you, for people who don't really know what that is, and for people who don't know who Ari is, can you just talk a little bit about that?
Well, it started, I think, 2009. And Ari came to New York from Southern California after graduating from college in Seattle. And he helped take care of his grandmother. His grandmother originally came from, I think, Sioux City, Iowa, but she came to New York in the 30s to go to Columbia University to become a librarian. So she was very smart, very intellectual, and Ari adored her. And they would spend time looking at old movies, and Ari would love to dress up with her jewelry. And she knew how creative Ari was, and she said, Ari, you've got to get yourself to New York. So the minute she passed away, he packed up and he says, I'm going to New York. So he got a job at the new museum in their bookstore, and he started seeing women all over, but, you know, a lot of interesting women come to museums. And he said, why are these women supposedly invisible? They're incredible. They're out and about, and they look great. And he started photographing them. He never picked up a camera before in his life. So that's where I met him. I walked into the new museum one day. It was a rainy day. I checked my raincoat, my umbrella. I had pink hair. And he comes running up to me and he says, you know, I photograph women over 60. Can I take your picture? And I said, how do you know I'm over 60? And he came over. He photographed me cooking. He photographed my artwork. He photographed me dressing up. And the rest is history.
What advice would you give to people for, you know, aging well and feeling healthy into old age?
Well, I think it's the most important thing, because without health, health is wealth.
Health is wealth.
Yeah. And I will often, if I had speaking engagements, tell 40-year-olds, this is the time that you really have to wake up. Because they say once you hit 60, it's really hard to turn it around.
Yeah.
So, you know, be conscious of what you're eating, but enjoy it. Don't be worrisome. Be active. You know, do exercise. You know, you don't have to run a marathon.
What type of exercise do you do?
I do yoga.
You do.
And
yeah.
of course,
I
being
knew
New
you
Yorkers,
did yoga.
we walk a lot.
Yeah.
And, you know, I eat healthfully. I do take supplements. I don't take any medication. Fortunately, I don't need it. And but just have an awareness and speak to people and find out what other people are doing. But the most important thing is really to enjoy life. You can't live fearfully like, well, I can't eat this and I can't eat that. Yeah. And, you know, I think being vegetarian, vegan is wonderful, but I think it's become a fad.
Yeah.
And all the other, you know, keto diet and all that. I think everything in moderation, including moderation.
Yeah. So going back, so you moved back to New York, you're in your late 30s. What are your 40s and your 50s? I mean, are you dating? Are you seeing people? Like, what is it like after getting divorced?
Well, I did meet somebody and we lived together, and he was from Portugal, and he had a very successful brass bed and brass furniture business here. And we stayed together for a little over 12 years. And
then, that's long term.
Yeah. And things started to go downhill economically, issues, and finally we decided to split. So then I was single for 15 years, but very busy. And we didn't quite have, there was no online dating just yet. And, I was doing a lot of traveling, and I was happy as a single woman. Again, in New York, you're so busy and you're so involved, it's not like you need a partner.
Yeah.
So then the short of it is, a good friend of mine said in 2002, I have somebody I want you to meet. And she said, Stan's been reading labels on food since the 60s. The two of you are perfect for each other. And the other thing is he loved to go thrifting. So we met one time just for a short walk in the park. And afterwards we shook hands and he said, nice meeting you. And that was it. And then he called a friend Harriet and said, well, she's very nice, but she looks like a clown. And it's in the film because he talks about it.
Right.
And then we kind of didn't see each other, although this friend had a few other parties now and then, so we'd see each other across the room. And then one night, she's a musician. She was playing in a concert, and beforehand she had a party at a French restaurant. And, of course, I'm sitting with a bunch of women. In the middle of dinner, Stan gets up and goes over to thank the hostess, and accidentally he looks my way, and as they say, time stood still.
Oh,
so
for both of you,
yeah.
It was mutual.
Yeah, I smiled, and he said, "Can we sit together at that concert?" And I said, "Yes." And then he said, "Can I call you?" And I said, "Yes." What, another 5 years? anyway, so we called, and, you know, we went out one night a week, 2 nights a week, you know, and then we just took our time.
What do you think are kind of the building blocks of a healthy relationship as someone who met someone in your older age? And yeah, you've seen different relationships throughout your life.
It's about values, having similar values, similar consciousness, awakeness. And that's about looking at the spiritual side of yourself and being on planet Earth, that we're here only as a trial. And what can we do to make this a better place? And acts of kindness are really the bottom line, you know, because it's really the energy that you transmit.
Yeah.
And that's what's important. And people pick up on that.
Yeah.
You smile at the bus driver, you smile at a homeless person on the street. It makes a big difference.
Yeah.
You know? It really does.
How would you define love?
It's an energetic thing. It's a magnet. It's a soulful thing of connecting on a soul level. And again, values. You know, similar values. Not that if somebody has different values that you dismiss them, but if there's going to be magnetism, then there has to be some value system that really pulls you together. Again, kindness, an open heart, health and healing, joyfulness, playfulness.
You are truly a walking work of art. So people react to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't wear this hat everywhere walking down
Yeah.
the street. You know, maybe when it gets to be summer, you know, won't look
Yeah.
so crazy. But you know, again, I don't care. If I'm comfortable, then I'll just do it.
Yeah.
And again, it's a way to start a conversation.
Yeah.
So what's better than that for making friends and giving, and people smile.
Well, thank you so much. This was truly such an honor. Seriously. So
For
thank
me
you so
too.
much for coming on.
For me too, definitely. Thank you.